As musicians, music producers, sound engineers, we all love reverb and delay. But if you make one of these 6 mistakes I'm gonna talk about today, your mix will automatically sound amateur. And I want you to avoid that. So, let's get started this video. The first big mistake you have to avoid when you want to add reverb and delay to your mix is simply to overuse it. I mean, you don't need to add reverb and delay to all your tracks, and people don't need to hear all the effects used in your mix. Sometimes reverb and delay are things that you feel more than you hear. For example, in a rock song, you cannot really hear the effects used on the main vocals because the distorted guitars and the drum take a lot of place in the mix, and that's normal. You can't make the listener hear all the effects you use in your mix, or it would sound horribly muddy and mushy. So when you want to add reverb or delay in a mix, just take a step back first and adjust the volume of the effects to emphasize the space and depth you want to give to the source, but don't try to make them audible in a mix at all cost, or it could ruin your mix, especially if you repeat the process on several tracks. I'm gonna play an example of an excess of delay and reverb on vocals. Then you're gonna hear a fixed example where you won't hear all the effects, but you're gonna feel the vibe way more. Okay, the next mistake you have to avoid when you mix music is to use too long reverbs or delays. I don't really know why, let me know in the comments what you think, whether you're amateur or professional, but I feel like a lot of amateurs in the field of music production are convinced that reverb has to be something airy and long, and that a delay has to have a big feedback to sound good. It's especially the case for reverb, but even if a big and long reverb is always pleasant to listen to in solos, sometimes it's not what the song needs. And very often long reverbs are difficult to control because it takes a lot of place in the mix and it can make the whole mix sound imprecise and less punchy. The choice of reverb will generally be done following 2 main parameters: the tempo of the song and the rhythm of the vocals. Generally speaking, the faster they are, the shorter the reverb. But there are also other parameters to take into account. You can find them in this video right here. Once again, let's hear an example of a too long reverb in the mix, and then a reverb better suited to the song. Third mistake is not using reverb and delay in auxiliary when it's necessary. I'd like to insist on the when it's necessary, because sometimes in music production it's not. In my productions, for example, it happens very often that I use reverb and delay as inserts in very specific conditions. The main ones being, first, I want to treat the source with the effect as a whole. 2, the balance between the direct source and the effect will not move or get modified in the song. And 3, I won't need to add some unusual process to my reverb and delay. But if one of these 3 conditions is not met, I will use my reverbs and delays in auxiliary. Because even if I know using effects in auxiliary takes more time to set up, you will have 100% control over the effects without affecting the direct source. So if you want to add a chorus, a de-esser, use a delay and reverb in the same auxiliary, get creative with the reverbs and delays of your song, well, in auxiliary, you can. So don't do the mistake of thinking that using reverb and delay in inserts will always do the job, because most of the time it doesn't, and it will just add limits to your creativity. By the way, you won't be able to fix the next issue if you don't use your effects in auxiliary. But before we go to the next point, if you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, make sure you click the like button and subscribe to my channel if you want to watch more content like this one. The next one is not EQing your reverb and delay. This one is very, very important because you gotta keep in mind that reverbs and delays are things that play in the background while the next elements in the timeline are already playing, which means that most of the time we hear these effects at the same time as other elements of the mix. If your effects are not cleaned up frequency-wise, they will conflict with the rest of the mix and make your mix less energetic. This is the reason why it is so essential to EQ your effects, especially in the bass and low mid-range, where a lot of phasing issues can be heard pretty quickly if you don't pay attention to this cleanup stage. For example, if you want to add reverb and delay on, I don't know, a big deep voice and that you don't clean up the low frequencies, there is a big chance that your mix become muddy and less powerful. And besides this parameter, you should also use an EQ after you reverb and delay, especially reverb, to get the exact sound you need in your mix. For example, in vocal mixing, you could find an excess in the high mid range because of the sibilant sounds that hit the reverb. In this case, reducing this range can be a very good idea to avoid having an hissy reverb in the mix. The next mistake you have to avoid when you mix music is not using automations. If you don't know what automations mean, it's simply the fact of writing specific parameter values at different parts of the timeline. You can do it with the volume of a track, but also with the sense of a track, which means that with automations, you have the possibility to modify the amount of reverb and delay throughout the song on each track of your mix. And I personally strongly believe that using this kind of tool is essential to give more relief and contrast within a song, and that without automations you cannot reach pro results, at least in 95% of the cases. The best example is the use of the delayed throw, which is a mixing technique mainly used in vocal mixing that allows to emphasize the delay only on certain syllables of the vocals. In short, without automations, you won't be able to give the life your song needs. The last mistake you have to avoid only concerns the use of reverb, and it is choosing the wrong type of reverb too often. In music production, you have to know that there are several types of reverb, which are whole, room, plate, spring, and chamber, and each type sounds very, very different. Many people think that the only parameter that makes the difference is the decay time, but the type of reverb is really the foundation of how the reverb will sound in your mix. For example, here is a whole reverb with 3 seconds of decay time. And here is a plate reverb with the same decay time. Quite different, isn't it? And if you don't know how each type of reverb sounds, you will potentially make the wrong choices very often in your mixes, and therefore not give the space each source need in your mix. If you want to know how each type of reverb sound and how to choose them in the right way, you can check out this video where I talk about the 5 types of reverb you can find in music. If you stop doing these mistakes and start using the solutions I gave you in this video, you should really upgrade the quality of your mixes to get closer to something that sounds professional. Before you leave, make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel to watch more quality content on music production. See you soon. Bye bye.